Doug the bounty hunter claims Brian Laundrie might be alive if parents cooperated with cops before Dr. Oz appearance. Doug the bounty hunter has claimed that Brian Laundrie might still be alive today if his parents had cooperated with police from the beginning. The reality TV star, 68, who conducted his own independent search for the wanted fiance of Gabby Petito, made the remarks in an interview with InTouch on Thursday, hours after Laundrie's remains were identified by police in Florida. Doug believes Brian may still be alive if his parents had worked with police sooner. Credit, John Chappell, commissioned by the Sun U.S. Digital Edition. Laundrie's remains were found on Wednesday. Credit, Instagram. If the Laundrie parents, Christopher and Roberta, had fully cooperated from the beginning, Brian Laundrie might still be alive, Doug, real name Doug Chapman, said. The positive ID of Brian Laundrie's remains gives some measure of closure to this case, if not to Gabby's family, who will likely now never know what truly happened. As a parent who has also lost a child, I know there's no ending to this story that brings Gabby back. A backpack and notebook belonging to Laundrie were found by police near skeletal human remains later identified to be the 23-year-old at Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park on Wednesday. While law enforcement shared very few details, two sources told local media on Thursday that the remains found were skeletal, consisting of a series of bones and a portion of a human skull. The remains, and the articles belonging to Brian, were found in a stretch of land inside the 24,000-acre park that until recently had been submerged in floodwaters. Tom Joyce, a retired NYPD commander, exclusively told The Sun that the remains have likely suffered a lot of post-mortem predation. If the remains are skeletal, that means the tissue has been pulled away from the bones, Joyce said. That's what it sounds like to me because it's definitely not long enough time for it to go naturally. He added, if it's only a 3 to 4 week period and there are only skeletal remains and very limited tissue remaining, I would have to say there's a lot of activity that pulls all the skin and flesh and muscle and stuff away. Laundrie was reported missing by his parents on September 17. Joyce said the skeletal state of his remains means that medical examiners may not be able to actually determine Brian's cause of death. Realistically, there are three things that could have happened, the retired NYPD lieutenant commander of detectives said. He could have died accidentally, or by natural causes in the area because he ran out of food and maybe he was attacked by an animal. He could have committed suicide, or even potentially been the victim of a homicide. So let's say he killed himself and they find the skull, and it has a gunshot wound to the head. And if it's not reasonable, like let's say the entry is in the back of the head and the exit's in the front of the head, that tells a whole different story than, a shot to a temple, or from under the chin, or from inside the mouth. But if the death was caused by toxic substance abuse or an injury at tissue level, such as a cut or even asphyxiation, Joyce says that will be much harder to detect. Considering the latest developments, the investigators have a lot of work still to do in this case, he said. Sometimes the case will end up in what we at the NYPD call the cuppy circumstances under pending police investigation. Brian's parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, were present when the FBI discovered the remains. They were then asked to leave the park as investigators continued combing the area. Police were seen briefly entering the Laundrie's home in Northport on Thursday evening. Shortly afterward, the FBI released a statement confirming they had identified the remains as Brian's. That determination was made through the comparison of dental records, the FBI said. On October 21, 2021, a comparison of dental records confirmed that the human remains found at the T. Gabby Petito's family said they would not be commenting on Laundrie's death. He had been on the run since September 13, 2 days after Gabby Petito was reported missing by her mother in New York. Her remains were discovered at a campsite in Teton County, Wyoming on September 19. A coroner later ruled that she had been strangled to death by a human force and that she'd been killed between 3 to 4 weeks before she was found. The pair had been on a cross-country road trip touring the U.S. national parks at the time of Gabby's death. Brian was not identified as a suspect but is the only named person of interest in the case. He returned home to Florida without her on September 1 in the couple's repurposed van before disappearing himself 12 days later. Brian's parents initially claimed to have last seen him on September 14 but later revised that date in a statement issued through their attorney. After finally reporting him missing on September 17, they told police they had driven to the reserve in search of him. While they say they didn't find Brian, they did find his silver Ford Mustang and drove it back to their home before contacting the cops the next day. They refused to cooperate with police for weeks before joining them to search Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park on Wednesday morning. The discovery of the remains and Laundrie's belongings was made less than 90 minutes after they arrived at the park. Their attorney Steve Bertolino told CNN Chris and Roberta Laundrie were following his instructions by not cooperating with the police. The parents had assumed that the experts, the FBI and all the tracking teams they had, would be able to locate Brian based upon the information that we had provided them to the specific areas and trails in the park that Brian liked to visit, he said. The attorney made it clear that it was him that had urged them not to speak with police and exercise their right to remain silent. Chris and Roberta Laundrie are not facing any charges and are not currently suspected of committing any crimes. Chris and Roberta joined police for the crucial search on Wednesday, credit Fox News. Laundrie's family told police to search the area last month, their lawyer says, credit Twitter/Flallison. Nancy Grace talks to Dr. Oz about Brian Laundrie's identification as Dog the Bounty Hunter claims he might be alive.